Yeah, we're live. We're live. Welcome, everybody. Claire Wasserman here, founder, author of Ladies Get Paid, an educational platform, global community, and book all about helping women level up in work, money, and life. I am so excited to have my, I think, fourth guest now, Leang Chung, who's the founder of Pelora Stack, which, oh God, now I've realized I didn't even ask you. Did I pronounce Pelora right?
Yes, you
Yes.
did.
Okay. Now, if you've been following along, you've realized for the last month I've been doing these daily lives by myself, which got lonely and boring. So I am now inviting other coaches on who also share my mission of helping folks, particularly women, earn more and live better. And they're approaching it in different ways. Leang Chung refers to herself as a career first coach. I want her to go into why that is, what that means. But she helps people navigate their careers, but particularly first time career changers, people managers, early stage founders, and solopreneurs. So, this is a conversation that is for all kinds of people, whether you are full time for someone else or you would prefer to be full time for yourself as a business owner. And in these lives, when I have these coaches on, when I reached out to these coaches beforehand, I said, well, what do you want to talk about? Like, tell me, what's feeling most exciting for you these days? What's resonating for you? And, Leang, you said to me you wanted to really focus on kind of the identity of being the first, quote, the first. I'll have you go into more detail about what you actually mean by that, but not just what it is to be the first, but how to actually leverage that as an asset, as an advantage, and to overcome some of the downsides that we can feel that we have as the first, which often manifest as like a scarcity mindset. And I'm sure the conversation will go in lots of different directions, but we'll begin right here with tell me about your business. Yes, the name Pelora Stack, where that came from, and also your I love that we both do cat eye liquid black. Uh, Yes. Oh, Mercedes Blue. By the way, I also want to shout out. We've got somebody watching, Mercedes Bluebird, who's awesome. She like is a total rock. She was a rock star at Gusto. Really, yes. I'm so happy to see. So if you are watching live, like come join the conversation, ask questions. But Leang, yes, welcome and tell me about you and your company and why you
Thank
decided to
you.
focus on being
Yeah.
quote the first.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your platform for all of us. When I saw your email, I'm sure that the entire community was really excited just to have these conversations, to share space, and to amplify our voices and how we can help the Ladies Get Paid community. As you shared already, I refer to myself as a career first coach because the work that I do is really centered and focused on these career first experiences. And the reason why I'm so passionate about it is because I experience a lot of first time experiences in my personal life and in my professional life. It all started with how I was born into this world. So I was actually born on a refugee camp in Thailand, and my parents had escaped a genocide that occurred in Cambodia. And I came to the U.S. when I was one, and we lived on government assistance. We didn't have a lot of resources. And my paternal grandmother, who is here in the States, she has 15 grandkids. And I am one of the first two oldest in the group. There's two of us that are the same age that are a few months apart. And so when you have that family background that I was born into, you don't have references, you don't have luxuries, you don't have access to a network, you don't know what you're doing most of the time. And so you're just kind of like navigating the world, trying to figure things out in the best way possible, and just kind of like learning from these different experiences. And what I know of in going through all these first time experiences is that it doesn't matter what that first time experience is, the feeling that you go through and the emotions that you experience are always the same. There's a ton of ambiguity. You don't have a roadmap. You feel really vulnerable. You sometimes feel uncomfortable sharing that experience with other people because you're afraid of being ostracized or, looking bad or weak. And there's a lot of trial and error that comes with it. And sometimes that trial and error can be quite painful and costly. And so I wanted to utilize my skills and my life experience to help other people out as they're navigating their first time experience.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any specific examples from your own life where you remember, it really struck you that you were the first or the only one? And then how did you navigate through that?
Yeah, there's a few glaring examples that happened. I would say, during my 20s. So I used to be a college recruiter, and I recruited at NYU, Columbia, Barnard, Wharton, Cornell, like all these top tier schools. And I remember sitting on campus interviewing students that were majoring things that I had no idea what they were, right? And being so prepared for a summer internship program, for an entry level position. And I was thinking, like, they have been groomed their entire lives, right? Going to prep school, getting tutors, volunteering, they basically had the infrastructure set up for them to prepare them for entry into the professional world, right? And it was such an advantage that I had no idea existed, because in my family it was, you go to school, you go to a community college, you get a government job, you have a nice, stable, secure life. Like that was, how success was defined for me. It wasn't, having a career. It wasn't, doing all these other things. So that's where I noticed, like, wow, there's a real difference between the way I was raised and the access that I had. And, how I was set up for my career versus like the way all these students were. So that was the first startling one. The second one was when I had shared with my mom that I negotiated my salary. And she was completely appalled, because she said, like, you should just be, in her mind, it was like, you should just be grateful that you got the job offer. Like, they selected you for the job. Like, you are the winner. Like, why are you asking for more money?
You are the winner. I love that.
And when I told her, how much, more I got when I negotiated my offer, she was like, oh my God, you should do that all the time. So it was like, her mindset shifted so quickly, from this like scarcity mindset of like, just feeling grateful for the things that you have, to like, oh, wait, there's actually like more that you can get access to. All you need to do is actually speak up and say something about it.
By the way, I saw on your website, one of the first things that you wrote was first salary negotiation was with my dad, parentheses, and it was an epic fail. So you obviously have to tell that story.
Okay. So my dad used to have a printing company. So he was an entrepreneur. And this was when there were no computers. It was like print in newspapers. He did yearbooks, like, all that stuff. He had a ton of different clients. And I used to type invoices for him on carbon paper, with my little typewriter on a cardboard box, sitting, with my legs folded and typing invoices on this thing. And so one day he comes home and he has like these handwritten invoices that he has me type out, on this carbon paper. So he would always give me, every time I typed out these invoices, he would hand me $20. And then one day he was really busy and he comes home with a big stack of these handwritten invoices. And I was like, sweet, I'm going to get so much money, right, from typing out all these invoices. So by the time I was done, he reaches into his wallet and he hands me a $20 bill. And I said, wait a minute, that's not fair, because I did so much more work and I'm getting paid the same amount of money for like a larger volume of invoices. And my dad, who has had a really hard life. So I just told you the background story, right? And he just like had no patience for this conversation with this 13-year-old. So he just looked at me dead in the eyes and he just said, I let you live in this house. And that was the end of the conversation.
Yeah. Like, you should be paying me.
Yeah. But I was really proud of myself when I look back on that experience, because there was like a lot of analysis that was going on in my head in terms of like, well, clearly I'm doing more work
Mhm.
and I should be compensated for the extra work. It does not equal, in size to, how I was compensated before. So I always love to share that story because it really was, my early experience of like, standing up for myself and asking for more money.
Yeah, and that you had that within you, that
Yeah.
was like an instinct. So I want to talk about, I mean, you've mentioned already some of the disadvantages of being, quote, the first. Before we get into how it can be an advantage or how you could make it into an advantage, if you want to just mention any other things that you find, whether it's the scarcity mindset, just like the common struggles of being the first, and then ways that folks who might be experiencing it can start to make a shift, both emotionally and mentally, and then, tangibly, externally,
Yeah.
what they can do.
Well, I would say the first thing regarding a scarcity mindset is how we have these programs that have been ingrained in us at a very young age. And so the programming that I was raised on that kept, replaying in my head about money is we can't afford that. We need to save money. You need to buy this, not this, because this is on sale and this is clearance, right? This is good enough, even though it's broken. Like you just need to just use it, right? And so that message and that programming appears later on in life, right? And so that's when it's like, okay, well, I should just be lucky to have this job. I shouldn't ask for more money, right? Um, I really want to get certified or join this boot camp, and it's going to help me, but now's not the right time. It's too much money, and I don't feel like it's right to spend that money on myself, right? Like we're constantly playing this game of like, trying to shuffle money around and having to worry about, money in this way and not thinking about like wealthy people don't think about it's not spending money, it's investing, right? So like
Mm.
think about like going back to school or going to a boot camp. Like this is not me spending money irresponsibly. It's not buying a YSL handbag. It is like investing in myself, right? This is something that's actually going to benefit me. I'm learning a new skill. I'm, gaining this experience. I'm getting access to a network, or I'm, working with a coach to help me, be better, when I'm sitting in front of a hiring manager interviewing for a job in order to, improve my career, in order to have more success in my life, in order to have, more flexibility in my world, whatever it is that you dream of. And that is that's the programming that we need to change in our mind when we are raised in this like scarcity mindset.
That's so brilliant. The difference between it looking at it as a expenditure versus an investment. I think
Mhm.
this is really helpful advice for so many people, regardless of if they were the first or not. I definitely see that as myself. Right. I mean, it's shifting from like short-term survival mode to actually being
Yeah.
long-term and intentional. But this then asks the question of, how do you define success, and what are your values, and how do you want to grow, and does that look different or feel differently than the way that you were raised? I mean, I'm sure your relationship with risk and how you defined
Mhm.
and measured success probably changed over time, right? I would imagine.
Absolutely. And I fully acknowledge that there's a huge difference between my parents and myself because I had the privilege and the luxury to grow up in this country and not have to endure um, and make the kind of sacrifices that they
Yeah.
had to make. So it's different. However, I do have the self awareness and also the knowledge that you could spend a lot of time struggling when you don't necessarily need to struggle,
Mhm.
or you can learn how to play the game
Mm.
and utilize these things to your advantage. And the a question that you asked earlier is like, how did you how did you like leverage this experience, or like what did you learn throughout that? One of the things that, and this is a cultural thing, as an Asian woman, you're not expected to be loud. You're not expected to be, yeah, you're not supposed to like take up space.
Yeah.
And you definitely do not talk about your accomplishments and you don't brag, you don't do any of those things. Well, the bad part about that is that in order for you to succeed in this world, you need to be all of those things.
Yeah.
And that was really hard for me. It was like it was such a discomfort, coming out of my shell and like talking about, hey, like these are the things that I'm really good at, or these are the things that I learned, and I may have failed at that point, but I've actually utilized that experience to improve my life in some way, and now I'm using that experience to improve the lives of my clients. That's very difficult for some people to adapt that language. And also, like, from a point of view of networking, I was raised on like, you keep your business to yourself and you need to be self-sufficient and you need to be independent. You don't go around telling people about, what you're lacking and what your gaps are and like what you need, help with, right? Because that's like considered a handout. And that is very uncomfortable for people to like shift out of that mindset. I totally understand it. But it is something that if we don't pay attention to, again, it's like that programming, and we don't pay attention to all of these little nuances, it like catches up on us.
How do you start to undo that though? So even just taking that example of not wanting to brag or the guilt of feeling like you're getting a handout, what might be some tangible tips you could give for folks that they can begin, of course, starting with the self-awareness, but then you're aware, now what?
Well, I always say, if you really want to learn about yourself, become an entrepreneur because you will learn a ton of things, and you will force yourself out, into this discomfort, because I can't survive if I don't ask for help. I can't survive if I don't do business development. I can't survive if I don't know how to market myself. Like, there's just no possible way. So that was, like me just kind of like jumping into the deep end and getting comfortable with all of these different things. When I was working for different companies and in the corporate world, I really leaned on a lot of the friendships and mentors that I had along the way, and different communities that I was part of, to like feel comfortable, in a very small and private setting, talking about some of the things that I was struggling with, or asking for support, in different ways, or just like inquiring, like, oh, I overheard you talking to so-and-so about this like upcoming project that's happening. Like, who's doing that? How can I get involved? How can I, chip in, or like at least learn about it, just like getting comfortable asking questions, and finding out more information, and just talking to people was like my, kind of like taking the baby steps to get comfortable with all of that.
Mm-hmm. I also want to just ask you a little bit about the pressure, which is interesting because I come from like the exact opposite background of you, in that the pressure I felt was that I come from a very high achieving family, given all the privileges in the world. But like, I mean, I have two brothers. One's a surgeon at Harvard. The other one is in the Foreign Service, and I went to Yale. Both of them went to Yale, So it's like the pressure I feel is that I am like the last in the family. The pressure you feel is the first in the family.
Yeah.
So what does that, how do you like pressure makes diamonds? I don't know. Like, if you want to be cliche about it, like, can you use that in some productive way, or you just ignore it? Like, for you specifically, how did that pressure manifest itself? And then how did you work either through it or with it?
Yeah. I think that pressure absolutely makes diamonds. I think it forces us it forces us to take action and make choices in some way.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the benefit of having some level of pressure. I, I come from, like different from your experience. I didn't have a set of expectations that was laid out for me. It wasn't like my parents said to me, like, you need to be an engineer, you need to be a doctor, and we're going to be really disappointed in you if you don't become any of those things. Like, I didn't even have that. And so I had the privilege of just kind of like using my career as a sandbox, and just kind of, playing around and testing things out. There was a sense of freedom and creativity that gave me access to. But once I started performing, the pressure definitely started to occur of like living up to, um, the like I often joke like when I when I told my parents that I decided to start my own business, they were very disappointed.
Really?
I was like,
Even though your father was an entrepreneur, right?
yes, but he knew how difficult it was as an
Oh,
entrepreneur, and
okay.
so did my mother, right? And
Yeah.
so it was like, well, you have a high paying job, you're so successful, you're you're just doing really well, you live a comfortable life. Why would you give up all those things in order to struggle? And I
Yep.
think also in their mind was like, great, like now what are we going to brag to our friends about, right? Because
Yeah.
now, like, what are we going to talk about? And so I definitely, that's when I started to feel like there was an expectation that they had, and that I was somehow disappointing them in this decision that I made. That was the only time. But yeah, to answer your question, I absolutely think that you can leverage the pressure in a
Mhm.
positive way because it gets you off of your ass and like gets you out there doing something, at least to experiment
Yeah.
and test things out.
Right. Yeah. And like action, action, reflection, action, reflection. Now, when you sent me your area of focus for today's conversation, you mentioned that it's not just, what it's like to be first and how to overcome it, but you can really use it as a competitive edge.
Mhm.
Specifically, how do you do that?
Yeah. So I like to tell the story about a big box of crayons. So when I started kindergarten, I didn't speak any English. I was in, English as a second language classes up until the third grade. And my kindergarten teacher was Miss Jackson. And one day I was observing Miss Jackson walking around with a giant box of crayons. It was like a 64, 92 pack of Crayola crayons. So I watch her walk up to each student. And as she walked up to each student pulled out two crayons. And so she proceeded to do this. And by the time she got to me, I pulled out two crayons. And when I tell this story later on in my life, I realized that because of my lack of like ability to communicate and understand what was going on, what I did learn to do in absence of like, this
Mhm.
skill is I learned how to read the room. I learned
Ah,
how to observe behavior. I learned how to pattern match, right? I
yeah.
learned how to use my analytical skills. And I utilized that, for the entire time when I was, learning how to speak this language that has now set me up and actually helped me in so many ways in my career when I was leading people and culture for all these different companies. Because guess what? I got paid to observe people's behaviors. I got paid to read the room. I got paid to pattern match. That was when I was able to dial into this like secret skill that I've been refining and becoming better at since I was in kindergarten. And so I think that there are so many things that we forget about that we have been working at, and we have been refining, and we have like developed this thing into a real strength of ours that we can then tap into later on and utilize that somehow in our profession.
Oh, I love that. Do you have any stories from clients too, by the way? Like any folks that you've coached or you've seen them go from a certain like low point or struggle challenge to, helping them navigate to a better place? I know I'm just asking you that.
Yeah.
Without any pre-warning, but if anybody comes to mind, I always love to hear, inspirational stories.
Yeah. Well, one of the most inspirational stories I have is I work with a lot of really great clients that have some fantastic stories, but there was one that jumps out to me when you ask that question. She would always get to the final round of the interviews, and then the other candidate would get picked over her.
Hmm.
And this happened so many times. Like she would just make it. She would always get, she got the phone calls, she got the interviews, she'd make it to the final round, and she never got picked.
Yeah.
And she said, there's like something's going on. And when I initially met her, she started getting really emotional telling
Yeah.
me the story. And then I, was digging into, asking a lot of probing questions and digging into it. And there was an incident that happened that caused her to lose her confidence. And somehow that final interview became a trigger. And it started to play itself out in that she would lose her footing and she would start to like second guess her answers. And then she came across as like, unsure of herself. And of course, like, they would go with the other candidate. And so we went through mock interviews and we just, and she was like, game on, like, I want to do this. I want to get past this. And so we just kept, and I would give her real-time feedback. Like, okay, this is how I'm seeing it. And I have the experience of being a hiring manager. I've been a recruiter, so I can tell you flat out, like, this is what they're going to think. This is how you come across. And after coaching, she was picked. She got, she actually got the offer. So it was just amazing, right? To just be there with her, like going through that process. And it happens to the best of us. I mean, like, I understood it because I've been in her shoes. Like, I know what it's like to go to the final rounds multiple times and then not get selected. And it hurts.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard not to take it personally. I mean, it's really hard. I actually think you should take it personally and then use it as a way to learn and grow. But it's so good to hear that she did what your mom said, which was win. She won. And the final question that I've been asking all the coaches that come on the lives is, fundamental elements of becoming your own biggest champion, in work, in money, in life. We have to advocate for ourselves. We cannot rely on anyone else. So for you, what would you say would be those kind of like the basics that people really should work on, the day-to-day, in order to get to that place where they can feel confident that, yeah, they truly are advocating for themselves. They are their biggest cheerleader or champion.
Well, for me, I like to take a look at all of at the end of the year, I always take a look at like, what did I accomplish that year? And I also am constantly updating my website, with different kind of information, different events that I'm speaking at or like, places I've been featured. And when I take a step back and I see like where I started to like all that I've accomplished today, I mean, it's amazing. And that came from me, like, this is something that I actively worked on. I just didn't sit here, eating chocolate, like waiting for people to come. Like, this is my way of like putting myself out there into the world, and the world responded. So if there's a way for you to catalog and document the things that you have achieved along the way, even if they're small, you'll be amazed at how much you can get done within a year. I remember listening to Ruchika Tulsian, who is a DEI thought leader. She co-wrote the article, the HBO article that's really famous now. It's called Stop Telling Women That They Have Imposter Syndrome. And she keeps what she refers to as a smile folder. So every time someone writes her a really lovely note, or she does a really great job at an event or something, she puts it into this smile folder. And whenever she's like feeling a little like low energy or bummed, or like something's really bothering her, she looks to this smile folder, and it's just like a reminder of like everything that she's accomplished and the impact that she's had on the people that she's interacted with. So I think that that's quite powerful. The other thing that I do is learn to distinguish who to listen to and then who to drown out. There are people who are in my community who have been supporters of me, like real cheerleaders and champions. And I know, like, whenever they're speaking about like how they feel after they have a conversation with me, or the advice that I offer, or, anything, like, I feel really great, because I it's like a reminder of like, wow, I do know, I do have expertise.
Yeah.
I do know what I'm talking about. And I am out there, helping people. And then lastly, it's my clients, like I stay in touch with them, often after we end. And sometimes they come back because they have a new problem that they're looking to solve. And sometimes they just want to, like, check in and see how I'm doing. And they're just like a reminder of, my work and impact, and that this is the right path for me. And so that's how I do it.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And Ruchika was actually a speaker of ours at our annual conference way back in the day when we did it in Seattle.
Mm.
One thing I'm going to add to the keeping the kind of like smile file, or, I call it a brag book, put it online, put it on LinkedIn, when ask permission, of course. But if somebody sends you a lovely email giving you feedback, whether it's a client or a customer or a teammate or your boss, post it on LinkedIn and say, encourage other people to do the same.
Mhm.
It's not bragging, it's just truth telling.
Yeah. It's just
um,
and it's not that the what I love about it is like, fine, it doesn't have to come from you, it's someone
right.
else's voice,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a testimonial. How can people find you, follow you, and as always, pay you, ladies?
Well, first of all, you can always find me on LinkedIn. That's the platform that I'm the most active on. So please connect with me there. Follow Pelora Stack, and you can check out different resources on the Pelora Stack website. That's Pelora Stack.com. And I would love to work with you. So if you are working through a first time experience, whether it's a career change, you are becoming a people manager for the first time, or you're even looking to just like advance your career and be more purposeful and intentional about landing that promotion, let me know. I would love to work with you.
Awesome. Leang, you are so lovely. This was a really enlightening conversation. And could you just say the liquid eyeliner brand that you
Oh,
use?
it's actually, I don't know the brand because it's from a Japanese store. And yeah, it's great. It lasts forever. It doesn't run. And
Maybe
it's
you could take a picture and
okay.
post it online and then get sponsored by them.
All right.
You look beautiful. Okay, well,
Thank
thank you so
you.
much for being here. Thanks to everybody who joined us, whether you were live or listening after the fact. We love you. We appreciate you, and go get paid. Bye.
Thanks.